People this year to induct. Aaron will obviously be in the induction next year. His mom and Leslie and family were back east for the Bassmaster induction back there to the Hall of Fame and Bass Fishing Hall of Fame, and they couldn't attend this year, so we'll wait till next year till they can be here. But I want a big round of applause for each of these guys. We're going to bring them up one at a time and give them their moment of fame up here for everything they've done for not only Wombass, but bass fishing in the industry in general. Our first induction is celebrating 40 years of Wombass, and this particular person was involved in the very, very beginning when Harvey Naslin was involved getting tournaments going out here. The very first U.S. Open in 1981 that Greg Hines won. He was our longtime editor of Wombass and writer for Western Outdoor News. He is, what, 91? 81, sorry about that, Bill. 81, and Bill Rice, will you please come on up, our first induction to the Wombass Hall of Fame. He's going to be brought up by his son, Steve, and also his daughter, Leah, that made the trip from Texas so that we can present Bill Rice for his Hall of Fame induction, for everything he had to do with getting Wombass to where it is today and being an integral part of it. Steve is going to say a few things for his father, and we'll let Bill say a couple things. It was really cool to see David Glebe. He's so happy to see Mark and Rick Klein and some of the older guys that have been fishing this forever. So a round of applause for Bill Rice and his son Steve. Come on over, Billy. How are you, buddy? It's good to see you. Come on over here. You want to say anything to the fans?
Thank you for everything, that's all.
Thank you for everything, that's all. So we're going to let Steve talk a little bit about his dad and some of the cool stories for a few minutes. Steve, everybody give him a moment.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Billy. On behalf of my dad, you might notice that he's actually pretty humble, which is why he doesn't say much. He's crying, so it's going to make me cry. It's going to make me cry too. Yeah. How many people know who this old guy is? Yeah. Cool. How many have had a beer with him? There's a few of you out there. Yeah. I want to say, well, he might be the luckiest guy in the world, and maybe I'm the second for being his son. Yeah. He was in the, sorry. We're both just very emotional people. In the 60s, when most of you weren't even born, I wasn't even born, he was a founding member or co-founder or a contributing member to most of the bass clubs in the LA Basin and San Diego. He was putting on tournaments with Harvey before the tournament circuit even existed, I think. You know, bass club circuit stuff where I remember seeing a picture. There were no limits, and there seemed to be endless fish, and there was just piles of fish all along the shoreline back in the old days. Back in the stringer days, and you know, they did at least donate them to the local kids clubs and food kitchens and stuff. But it's just been around a long time. We're talking about lucky. One day he picked up the phone at Western Bass, and Merlin Olsen asked him if he wanted to go fishing with him. So this dude, I don't know if anyone else can say this, but he's been fishing with Merlin Olsen, Lee Marvin, Roland Martin, Ray Scott was a good friend of his, and the skipper from Gilligan's Island. Anybody here can say they fished with the skipper from Gilligan's Island? No. Yeah. So the interesting thing about my dad, I think.
Our second person inducted into the first class of Wombass Hall of Fame was somebody very integral in helping me when I first started. I got the job in 2010 to work with Western Outdoor News on their family fun derbies, their trout derbies and their striper derbies and some of the other events that they did, because Harvey had come back after I think Bill had left, and obviously a lot of people remember why am I forgetting his name right now? The previous tournament director, Kennedy, Mike Kennedy, prior to that. But he was so willing to meet with me and to sit down with me and bring some of the other anglers with him so that I could learn as fast as I could what I needed to learn to do this job. Because literally in 2010, I was at a tournament here at Lake Mohave. I think there were 60-some boats at it. Some of the guys that fished that event are here. And I just kind of was watching. Harvey was like, hey, we're going to try and groom you into this and see if it's something that fits for you. And Harvey screamed and yelled at me for showing up at the awards with sandals on. And I learned real quick that Harvey was serious about how he ran tournaments. And this particular person doesn't need a whole lot of introduction, but he's a 3-time US Open champion, one of only 3 people that have accomplished that in their lives, and he's here potentially for his 4th. But it took a little convincing to get him here. Mr. Mike Folkstad. Mike, where are you, bud? Come on up. There he comes. While Mike's coming on up, I'll talk a little bit about, there's that round table. That was just after Kent Brown and Rick Grover pulled me aside at one of the Bassathons when I got the job and said, you need to get all the organizations together. You need to make sure they work together, because if they don't work together, it won't work and everything's going to fail. You remember that day? Both of you guys pinned me in the corner of your Anglers Marine. I was like, I'm like, okay, all right, we'll do what we can. And there was a lot of different organizations back then, but we did the best we could to work together. And I think now we're at a point where we're really working well together with all the organizations, whether it's FLW, whether it's some of the new ones that have come up, Wild West, or even New Gen, and some of the other organizations out there, ABA. Rick Pierce and Bass Cat Boats have done an amazing job sponsoring all the organizations out here out west. And Mike, come on over here, bud. Round of applause again for Mike Folkstad. I want you to say a few little words for the crowd here.
Okay. Well, I want to thank One Bass and Billy. I got the call. It was very humbling to find out I was inducted into the Hall of Fame. And so it's, quite an honor. And I kind of have something to say about all the inductees. The first one's Don Ibino. In 1978, I was following Don to Lake Orville. And we stopped for gas, and I convinced his AAA to give him my car so I could ride with Don, because I wanted to pick his brain on how to doodle and doodle slide. So anyhow, by the time we got to the lake, I think I'd sucked all the information out of him. And unbeknownst to me, he sold me a rod, a reel, the line, the hooks, the painted sinker, and the spinny worms. So that cost me $400. But it was well spent, because I went out and won the tournament, doodle sliding and doodle shaking. And thank you, Don, and congratulations. Bill Rice, first time we went fishing together when he was editor, it was probably 1974, somewhere in there. We went to Lake Sutherland. He wanted to do an article. At the end of the day, he'd caught this giant bass. He's bringing it into the boat. I mean, it's got a big bucket mouth on it. I'm reaching out to get it, and it comes undone. And that bullet sinker hit me between the eyes. I still have the dent from it. I mean, it like knocked me out. Mark's phone number, cell phone, and I was at Clear Lake. I was broke down, called Mark. Mark says, when will you be at the ramp? I says, in a half hour. He says, I'll meet you there. So he dropped everything he was doing. He was probably watching football, football or something. And so anyhow, in an hour's time, he got me running, and then I was able to go out, and I did get a check. So that was great. Thank you, Mark, and congratulations. Trump's Mar-a-Lago got raided by the FBI, and they confiscated 15 boxes of memorabilia. Now that made me nervous, because I thought maybe I have 3 boxes, and I thought maybe one bass would come with the FBI at my home in Crestville. Well, the point is, Trump had a personal letter from Kim Jong-un, the North Korean president. I think I said his name right. Well, I had a personal letter from Rick Clunn and in my archives. And when I got DQ'd at the open for releasing the fish on the other side of the buoy line, and they come to my room, my wife cried like a baby because she didn't get her swimming pool. Now that's my bad wife. My good wife here is But anyhow, my wife's come all the way from Crestville, and my son's fishing the tournament, my younger son, Darren. And so thank you both for coming. Love you. The next thing, I'm going to play a little guess who this is. You know. Who am I?
Untitled.
There you go. Anyhow, you won. I want you to see Don Ivino after the meeting, and Don will give you your prize, but be sure and bring your wallet, because it's going to cost you. Anyhow, thanks everybody. Have a great tournament. Be safe, and I'll see you on the water.
Mike Bolstad, guys, 3-time U.S. Open champion, Bass Fishing Hall of Fame. All right, moving right along, we've got our third induction for this gentleman, which needs no introduction, but this guy has won just about everything there is out there. I use more quotes from this guy at this particular event than anybody else in the business. He has said, you cannot call yourself a true champion unless you've won a U.S. Open and have that to your arsenal there. He's also called the U.S. Open at Lake Mead the Iditarod of bass fishing. And I call him the shaman of bass. Rick Clunn, 2-time U.S. Open champion and friend. Come on up. Round of applause for Rick Clunn. Rick, how are you, sir? Here's your plaque. You're welcome. Why don't you go ahead and say a few words? And I called him Rick. I called him the right name because, little story, my first year, 2010, at the U.S. Open, I have a little virus missing in my head that I'm dyslexic. So when I see somebody or think of somebody, it sometimes will picture somebody else. And for whatever reason, I always got Rick Clunn and Gary Klein mixed up in my head. So every time I saw Rick that first U.S. Open, I kept calling him Gary. And by the third time I called him, Gary leaned over to me at the weigh-ins. He goes, "Son, you call me Gary one more time, we're going to have problems." I've never called him Gary ever since. So Rick Clunn, congratulations, and address the crowd.
Thank you. Thank you all for being here. There's all ages here now. That's the thing about this being 40 years. This is 48 years for me full time on different bass circuits. I will always, I've said this more than once, and I will continue to say it, this is my favorite event. I've won 4 Bassmaster Classics, but yet this event tells me who I am more than any other event has ever done, and continues to. And like he already stated, I consider it the Iditarod of bass fishing, because it was in July and August in the early days of pro, like you said. It was a 4-day event, and you had to be good to win it. And I know this modern term of GOAT is used too much, but, and you said this too, you can't be a GOAT if you have not won this event. It's just, there's nothing else compared to it. And I'm saying this for a lot of you young guys that are fishing, and there's a few guys that I've been fishing these as long as I have. But it really is a special event, and it's special also in a way that a lot of you don't realize. It's all the things. In the early days, we'd have probably 40, 50, 60 guys from the east fishing it. So it was a real contribution and sharing of techniques and ideals. I don't know that would have happened as fast as it did without the U.S. Open. I mean, you can look at, you know, D. Thomas brought flipping to the East. Bobby Gordon brought the Gets It. Don Ivino's already been mentioned. He was the first finesse guy that I ever knew. The East Coast guys brought the spook. Greg Hines won it the first year on the spook. Rich Talbot the next, but Gary Klein and I showed them that bait. And it came from the West. So we shared so many ideals that really elevated the techniques and the level of fishing. In fact, one of my favorite stories about Don was that I was in the process of winning, going into the final day of my old second U.S. Open that I won. And Don Ivino went up to Gary Klein and said, "What's he doing? Because he's fishing the wrong side of everything." I didn't fish in the shade. You know, a lot of guys out there stay in the shade, eat little pockets. And Don just said, anyway, I love it now when I go up to Don and said, "Don, I'm still fishing the wrong side of everything." But it's still, you know, Robert Frost said, 2 roads diverge in the wood, and I chose one less traveled, and that's a good example of it. And it has served me well. The other thing I kind of want to say here is there's a lot of family involved in this, and the thing that this is a story that it kind of woke me up to home from 2 weeks of tournaments, and she crawled in my lap. She crawled in my lap, but she was always giving me the cold shoulder. And so one time this happened, and she finally warmed up, but one time this happened, and I knew there was a fishing show coming on with me on it, so I flipped it on. And the show come on, and all of a sudden, here I am on the TV, okay? And all of a sudden, she jumps up and goes, Dad, look, there's Rick Clunt." And I thought it was funny too, until I thought about it. That's not, for her, that's not Rick Clunt. That's not Dad. And so really it hit me hard, and my wife Melissa kind of really helped me a lot in this, that I'm a pretty dang good fisherman, but am I as good being dad, or as good as being a husband or a friend? And so that's something we all have to sometimes work on. But anyway, again, thanks for having me. I love this event. And to coin a phrase, never accept that all your greatest moments are in the past. I don't care how old you are or how young you are. Thank you.
Round of applause for Rick Clunt, guys.
When I got the personal letter from Rick and was worried about it being confiscated, he's not only the greatest fisherman in the world, he is a true gentleman. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mike. He's right about that, that's for sure. All right, our next gentleman that's being inducted in the Hall of Fame, this guy has already been talked about a few times. He is very integral in the West with his techniques that he brought. He's very involved with Lowrance, and he's been to so many of the U.S. Opens working on everybody's Lowrance units on the launch ramp, even if he's not fishing the event. But we want to bring up Mr. Doodle himself, Don Ivino. Don, come on up, sir. Donnie's always at the trade shows. He's always at the different events, selling his worms, teaching people how to do his different techniques. I had an opportunity to fish with him at Castaic one day. We were doing some doodling and some, split shotting? Is that right, Donnie? Split shotting was one of his techniques, right? He's such a great man, and if you've ever been to Sunset Casino in Nevada, you'll see his face up on the board for some of the big wins he's had there. So round of applause for Don Ivino, folks.
You spelled my name right.
I did.
Well, thanks for everybody being here. You know, I've been at this game, I started about 46 years ago fishing a one bass tournament, and I believe I won that tournament. We won $1,500 because I told my wife if I win the tournament, I'll buy her a new rug. she wanted the rug, so she got the rug. But I've been at this game a long time, and it's a great sport for the professional fishermen that are in this sport are all class guys, and if they want their help, they'll give it to you. I've done a lot of things I could say, but I've been at this a long time, but there's one story that I'll never forget. This was another organization, but it was a world championship, and I won the tournament. I've been getting a lot of heat about my fairy wands and my sissy baits, and I won that tournament. And I remember I got up and I showed everybody that little 4-inch worm, and after that, finesse fishing took off, and that's something I never forgot. Because before that, you know, I took a lot of heat, but I was winning tournaments, fishing deep water, using my electronics, and I still help today with more ants, with all the new equipment out. If you learn to interpret what you're seeing on that meter, that will help you in your fishing for the day. And that's what I teach. Believe me, if you study your meters and pay attention to what it's telling you in the morning, it's going to give you a good idea what to do for the day. And I'm still teaching that today. And I have a lot of other stories, but I'm really honored that Billy picked me to be and be with the friends that I'm with behind me, all great fishermen, and I hope you all catch a whole bunch of fish out there. It's going to be a kind of a tough tournament for you all. Just pay attention to that meter, and that'll tell you what you're going to have to do. And maybe you ought to take that little 4-inch purple worm with you. Thank you.
Round of applause for Don Avino, folks. Fame inductee. Now, this gentleman I met back in 2010. He's been a part of every event back then when I was getting my feet wet at these events, and we've been with Mercury Motors ever since I've been here, and long before that. You know, I want to thank Michelle Kilborn at Mercury and Kevin Linehan. But Mark was at every single event with his service truck, and he would make the trek all the way from Northern California, all the different events, and he would make sure that guys would stay on the water, and that Mercury would get them to the end of the line there for the tournament. Does it with a smile, and back in the day, he was literally the best guy for the job. There was nothing that this guy couldn't fix, and if he didn't know how to fix it, he'd call somebody that would give him some information that would. So our next inductee, our final inductee of the evening, Mr. Mark Nicoletti, Mercury Service Mechanic. Mark, it's been a pleasure to be with you, and when I called you, you're like, "What are you doing, Billy?" I'm like, "Well," he goes, "You give me something?" I'm like, "Yeah, might be." He goes, "I'll be there." And of course, here he is. So without further ado, everybody, Mark Nicoletti with Mercury. Retired, but will always be with Mercury and always dear to our hearts. Mark?
Thank you very much. It's just an honor to be here in front of all the anglers. All of you have meant a lot to me in my life. I absolutely enjoy doing the bass tournaments. I retired from Mercury Marine as a service rep and was allowed to do the tournaments as a side job. I made so many friends with bass fishermen. It's just a wonderful group, a wonderful sport. And I'm one that doesn't fish, but I enjoy what I see on the weigh-ins and the weighing the fish. It's just been a wonderful, wonderful career for me, and it's meant a lot. Billy Egan and One Bass has been tremendous help also at all the tournaments. They were there to help me. Never failed to give me any assistance that I ever needed. So I have to thank Bill Egan, One Bass, Michelle Kilburn with Mercury Marine that gave me all the tools I needed to come out here with, take care of all the anglers. So I thank all of you.
Round of applause again for Mark Nicoletti, folks. Stand up, please. We're going to have you take a quick photo with everybody. And then I've got two other special people to introduce to you in just one moment. One other couple that I wanted to bring up and invite out to the U.S. Open, because long before me, they were the support staff for tournament directors prior to me. I couldn't do what I do without Tracy and Teresa Purdy and their family. Tracy, Teresa, stand up, please. The love, the help, the understanding. I mean, literally, when I go to Teresa and I say, hey, Teresa, I need, she goes, here it is. Okay, I need, here it is. She's always ahead of me. And without them, I would not be able to do the smooth events that we do. But I wanted to invite these people up because they were who Teresa and Tracy are to me, to other tournament directors prior to me, and without them, we wouldn't be here today. So I want to invite Bev and Dawn Payne for a Lifetime Achievement Award from Wambas. Dawn and Bev Payne, come on up here, guys. I know you know these guys. Did you see Bill earlier? Yes. All right, Bev, this is for you and Dawn. You're welcome. Donnie, how are you? You want to see him? So Bev, come on up here. We'll get you out in front so everybody can see you. If you have anything you'd like to say to the crowd?
I enjoyed every minute of it.
Yeah, Bev and Dawn on Facebook, she's always sending me messages. You're doing such a great job. It's so awesome to watch you guys. And she's always complimenting us on what we've done. And without these two doing what they did before myself and the Purdy's got here, we wouldn't be where we're at today. So I believe they deserved a big round of applause and award for their dedication to Wambas and to bass fishing in general. So everybody stand up and give them a round of applause, please. And all of our 5 Hall of Fame inductees. Don, you get in here if you like. Thank you all. Let's get over here with a quick picture.